welcome to Daily Debrief brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya and today we talk about the United States clearing a law to enhance chip production. Oil stops flowing via Druzbha pipeline from Russia to southern Europe, and an FBI raid on former US President Donald Trump's house. US President Joe Biden signed into law the Chips and Science legislation that pivots on moving semiconductor chip manufacturing to the US. The US once had global chip-making giants, but Taiwanese, Korean, the East Asian manufacturing powerhouses outran it. The US also wants to counter China's steady improvements in the field. The law provides a $53 billion subsidy to set up local chip foundries, part of a $280 billion subsidy to focus on a domestic industry that will seek to replace global supplies. We earlier spoke to Prabir Purkasta about what the US hopes to achieve in this chip war. Hi Prabir, welcome to the show. Prabir, the United States moving very quickly on the CHIPS Act. Just a while back, they had discussed having reshoring the chip manufacturing back to the US, and now suddenly they have the law in place. What is the US's interest in this?
Well, for a long time, the issue has been that chip making has moved out of the United States. Most of the advanced chips today come really from East Asia, particularly Taiwan, South Korea, and partly Japan. So if you look at all of this, the United States, which used to be the place where the chip making really grew, no longer has the silicon foundries, as they are called, for the latest version of chips that are being manufactured in the world. So this has been of concern to them. And particularly in case of a war, it's also possible that you are not able to therefore import from East Asia, and what would happen to you? Given that there is an interest in regaining what is called reshoring of the chip making foundries into United States, that means give them incentives, give them money, give them other support, and also bolster the basic background tools required for advanced chip making. So also spend in research, essentially subsidize big capital to move back into US, and also encourage big capital in the US, who were at one point in time leading foundries in the world, chip makers in the world, to again start a lot of their chip making activities, which they have lost. So this is the purpose of the bill. In one sense, it is enticing capital or giving capital handouts to do certain things. The other thing is looking at the world that you are in what the US feels is a competition between China and the US is going to grow. Therefore, friendshoring and in this case, reshoring vital industries like chip making is important. And let's face it, US companies or any other company is not going to reshore into the United States without freebies, without money being given to them. So this is what the US is doing, essentially funding them in a big way in order to reshore to the United States. Hopefully, therefore, they will get the entire value chain, supply chain of the chip making to be in the United States. They do a lot of the advanced research, tools which are involved in designing of chips. A lot of that activity is really carried out there. Chip making machines today are almost, advanced chip making machines are almost entirely from one single Dutch company. But the US has control over it because some of the vital parts come from the United States. Therefore, they claim whatever they touch comes under their sanctions, their control. So that they have under their control. European Union is friendshoring. And there are Japanese companies who do a certain set of things. So they're trying to see that they separate. In fact, it's a part of separating from the China manufacturing. And in this case, also encourage South Koreans and the Taiwanese companies to come and set shop in the United States so that their supply chain for at least the silicon industry, the basically electronics industry, semiconductor industry, then remains in the United States and therefore does not come under what would be called supply chain shock. Whether they can really separate from China is a big question. Can China fight this? Big question. These are big questions which future will answer. We cannot answer today.
Right, Praveer. I was just going to ask you that. Is this a ploy that seems like it will work? Is this a strategy that seems workable? Also, you have written for earlier that China has not been sitting on its hands all this while. So, what has it been doing, and what are the options that other countries have?
Well, a lot of the countries need to, of course, build chip making capabilities. That includes, of course, China, which has chip making capabilities, but not at the latest level of chips, which is 14 nanometer, 10 nanometer, 7 nanometer, 3, 5, all that. So that level, they have just started 14 nanometer chips. But even then, the chip making machines are really still 14 nanometer and below come from. Again, this Dutch company I was talking about, which is ASML. But below 10 to 7 nanometer, you require what I call you require what I call extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, which only ASML manufactures. But deep ultraviolet lithography, which a lot of other companies have. There are two companies, both in Japan, who can also deliver at least up to 14 nanometer lithographic machines. But that apart, China has two challenges. One is to, of course, build the chips that is required. They have just released 7 nanometer chips about a year back. But these are some basic chips, not the advanced processors that we would be seeing perhaps in a few months or maybe a year. So they are still trying to do 7 nanometer chips. Below that, they cannot go without the extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, which are banned by the United States from being supplied to China. Do they have their own lithographic machines? They have up to 90 nanometer lithographic machines. They're trying to develop 28 nanometer lithographic machines with which they can do 14 nanometer chips and also 7 nanometer chips, as they have shown recently. But 28 nanometer lithographic machines have not yet been released in the market. So we'll have to see what happens on that. They are supposed to release it this year. Let's see where that goes. So China is not sitting on its hands, but it is not something that is going to be easy. It will require probably around 5 years minimum, maybe more, for them to be able to enter extreme ultraviolet lithography at all, if they succeed, or it could take them up 10 years. But the point is, they are doing certain things in that direction, and lithography is the key element in what is called the silicon foundry. So I think that is going to decide whether China will stay or it will not be able to enter the chips, which are what would be called the advanced processor chips, which is really what powers your cell phones and maybe a lot of your computers as well today.
Praveer, thanks a lot for that update. Alleged payment issues have stopped the flow of oil via the Druzbha pipeline from Russia to Central Europe. The Russian company Transneft, which operates the pipeline, said that the Ukrainian side stopped the transport due to not receiving payments, which it blamed on sanctions. Russian oil traversing Ukrainian territories are not reaching Slovakia, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, but deliveries on another arm of the pipeline via Belarus to Poland and Germany are ongoing. Oil transported from Russia to third countries is excluded from sanctions, though Kiev has urged for a complete embargo on Russian oil. We go back to Praveer Purkasta. Okay, Praveer, thanks for staying with us. Praveer, Ukraine seems to have blocked access to the Druzbha oil pipeline. Can you just tell us what the latest and the background to this is?
Well, the access to Druzbha pipeline is, of course, not lost because it runs through Ukraine. The question is, this is what was supplied. That was supplying from Russia crude oil to a number of European countries. It was passing through Ukraine. It also goes then to Poland, it goes to Hungary, it goes to a number of other European countries. So in that sense, a major bulk of Russian crude oil today, not the ones which are coming from ships, but which are going through pipelines, go through the Druzbha pipeline. It appears that this is not something either Russia or Ukraine has done. Maybe Ukraine or Russia is also involved in this. But this seems to be because the fees which Russia has to transfer to Ukraine for the service of the pipeline could not be transferred because European Union sanctions on the Russian banks were making it difficult for this transfer to take place. Till now, these transfers have taken place. So why it has not taken place is yet is not clear. But it seems that the problem here is with the European Regulatory Authority, which has not given a clearance to the banks that they can service the payments that Russia has made and transfer it to Ukraine. That seems to be at the moment the bottleneck. So it appears that this bottleneck has persisted for more than 5 days now. So we're not aware what are the holdups that is taking place. The European Union has been quite tight-lipped on this. The regulators have not said what they think is the problem or why this step has been taken or why the step clearing the payments, which have been done till now, has not happened as yet. So I think this is a part of, do we sanction Russia? How much do we sanction Russia or not sanction Russia? I think this is the gray zone in which the Russians have claimed a lot of the things which are officially not sanctioned actually do not work in practice because the banks are not able to complete the transactions. So it seems there is a lot of gray area in this, either purposely created or actually that exists, which makes all these financial transactions difficult in the face of European Union sanctions that have been imposed. So this seems to be in that class, not so much as by intent or maybe by intent, but actually using regulatory confusion rather than a clear, open statement. Yes, we are not allowing transactions, therefore we will not allow oil transactions to take place. This is a very sensitive element because within the European Union, there's a lot of resistance to a certain extensions of sanctions, putting sanctions on oil and so on, and explicitly oil-based supplies were exempted from EU sanctions. And Hungary was one of the countries which actually pressed for this. So I'm quite surprised that this gray area still exists. And apparently this has not been closed by European Union, in spite of the fact there is an agreement that pipeline supplies of oil will not be sanctioned by the EU.
All right, Prabir, thanks a lot for that update. The FBI has raided Donald Trump's house in Florida, reportedly looking for details on whether he violated laws for handling classified documents. The former president has been the subject of investigation since the January 6, 2021 raid involving his supporters who attacked the Capitol building where the US Congress meets. Trump has been accused of trying to overturn the 2020 election result in which he lost, tampering with the result of the election in Georgia state, and is regularly seen challenging the election verdict. We speak to Anish from People's Dispatch about the raid. Hi Anish, good to have you back with us again. Anish, can you give us an idea of the number of probes and the kind of probes the former US president is facing?
Well, currently there are two major ones. Right now, what we are looking at is a probe under the Presidential Records Act. Now, this is something that is very specific in his case because earlier this year in February, the Department of Justice actually pointed out that they retrieved about 15 boxes of confidential documents that were given to him as president and that were retrieved from him after he had left office in January. So this is a continuation of that kind of probe on his person and his residence. And the reason for this is that the FBI apparently believes that there are more such confidential and presidential records that are kept by him, which are completely illegal for a former U.S. president. He's not a current one; he's a former U.S. president. So it is one of those instances. Before that, we have already seen how he's being indicted and also charged for provoking the riot in January last year and at the Capitol Hill, and how it has actually gone through. I think we have had about 8 hearings so far, and in all of those revelations were made, at least that's what they call it. A lot of that was pretty much public knowledge in many cases. of how he had provoked and even asked his supporters to make a run on the Capitol Hill and at the Congress, which was actually counting votes, the presidential college votes, and that only made it, sorry, the electoral college votes, and that only made it even worse for him. So obviously, Trump's presidency was not without controversy, and it is something that a lot of what he did during that time obviously is coming back to haunt him. And this is pretty much the reason. That is one part of the reason, obviously. But there is another part of it being a political slugfest being, played between the Democrats and the Republicans as the midterm elections and are nearing very close to us. And so that makes it even more important to take care.
Right, Anish. Anish, could you also talk about the FBI raid itself? What could be the fallout of this action?
There are plenty of fallout. Like the Republicans are already crying blood. They are pretty much accusing Democrats of using a federal agency to to hound a political opponent. That's how they're framing it. It's pretty much like they're trying to portray the Democratic administration as a totalitarian, authoritarian regime that is trying to just crack down on its supporters, sorry, its opponents. And on the other hand, I mean, like that is obviously far from truth, as we all know. But on the other hand, the Democrats are only making very, opportunistic use of the probes and charges against Trump. They are not really going after Trump's baseline, which is his support base of, his right-wing populism and of how not just right-wing populism, but white supremacist right-wing hate groups that are actually fueling his support base across the United States right now. And there is very little being done on that front. We are also seeing Democrats being very unsure of how they have to deal with the rising right wing because as we have talked about the primaries that are going on in the Republican side, there is a overwhelming wave of Trump support being seen in the Republican Party, which was not as evident in the previous two primaries and elections, as we have seen. The Republican Party was always divided, but in this case, there is a major consolidation happening of the right wing, and not just that, we have seen how a host of foreign policy hawks and war hawks are coming and consolidating not only behind Trump but also behind the right wing within the Democratic Party. So it is something that is obviously part of a larger issue that is going on in American politics, where the mainstream parties are really just too scared to touch the right wing, the actual right wing, and make a statement out of it. But they're only just going after Trump on charges that are not as great or grievous as his other actions, that which was to increase hate against minorities, hate against immigrants and refugees, hate against Asians, even like his anti-China bashing has a legacy of its own. We all know that. So in all of these cases, the kind of opposition that is happening against Trump is also very uh, is not sure-footed, at least from the Democratic Party's side. But the Republican Party is obviously making hay out of this because for them it is they're trying to make a martyr out of Trump through these raids. And we do not need to really go into the details of the raid itself because that itself has we have heard in some places where they said that the White House was not even informed at some point about the raid. So this is something that is very tedious to go after. But the larger issue remains that Trump is right now using everything he can to make any kind of political opposition from the government as a political mileage for him. And that is something that we need to be really concerned about in the coming years, not just for the midterms, but also the general elections that will be happening in 2 years' time. So this is a wider problem, obviously, of American politics, and the lack of spine in many cases of the liberals to actually deal with a problem that head on in many ways.
All right, Anish, thanks a lot for that update. And that is all we have for you today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Do keep watching us and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for updates from around the world. And for more news and analysis, visit our website peoplesdispatch.org.